You can now join us live every Saturday on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM in Dakar, starting 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. in French and from 10:30 a.m. to 11:55 a.m. in English. You can also follow our live streamings on Facebook and YouTube. Citizens Hour is your space to speak up. You can now comment live on issues, ask questions, and engage directly with our presenters and invited experts as we unpack major developments shaping West Africa. Make your voice heard. Be part of the conversation every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in French and 10:30 a.m. to 11:55 a.m. in English. Well, if you missed the show, catch the rebroadcast 6 p.m. in English and 7:30 p.m. in French. Citizens Hour is your time to speak. Hello there, and thank you for joining us on this edition of Citizens Hour, coming to you live on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal, and online at WADR.org. We're also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. From this year, Citizens Hour, as you've heard, comes to you every Saturday, starting from 10:30 a.m., bringing you more engaging conversations. I am Imo, edited here in Dakar, and I do have my colleague Usman Umara in Abuja co-anchoring the program. Usman, good morning.
Indeed, good morning, Imo. Good morning to our guests. Good morning, West Africa. We sincerely thank you for staying with us on this edition of Citizens Hour, where we bring to you conversations that center on accountability, justice, and the voices of the ordinary people. Now, on today's program, our conversation takes us to the global scene, where the United States of America, as you are aware, has announced the creation of what it refers to as a Board of Peace, an initiative it says is aimed at promoting stability and conflict prevention. But a lot of questions. What does this really mean for countries in the Sahel and, of course, even across Africa, countries that have actually been faced with deepening security challenges, political tensions and transitions, and shifting global alliances? Now, is it a genuine effort to support peace, or another layer of geopolitical influence in an already crowded security space? These are the questions we'll be asking on this program. And of course, we will have a very well-represented panel of guests to help us unpack the implications of this U.S. Board of Peace and what it could mean for regional security, sovereignty, and Africa-led solutions. Imo.
Indeed, here across Africa, questions also are increasingly being raised about aging leadership and the concentration of power. As we know, in several countries, long-serving leaders continue to dominate the political space, shaping national direction, while younger generations call for renewal, inclusion, and reform. Our second discussion will examine the implications of aging leadership on governance, democracy, and development in Africa, and also to know whether experience strengthens leadership or whether prolonged grip on power risks slowing political and social progress. This and many more we'll be discussing on the show this morning. Please stay with us. Yes, Usman, please go ahead.
All right, of course, it's time to welcome our listener and, of course, who are following us on live stream on Facebook and YouTube and other streaming platforms. You can also be a part of this conversation by dropping your message on the comment sections. Of course, definitely we will read out your comments, questions, and observations. Now, let's bring on board our guests for this first part of the conversation. Joining us from Banjul, the Gambian capital, is Dr. Nelson Goldpin Oba-Akoga. I hope I got that surname correctly, sir. He is an associate professor of political science, University of the Gambia. Imo.
All right, well, we do have some noise at the background, and please see if you wouldn't mind to mute your microphone if you're not talking. All right, well, let's welcome him to the program. We also have from Plateau, North Central Nigeria, Usman, where you are there, Mr. Kupeb Dawagade is Executive Director, Center for Innovative Governance and Sustainable Development, CIG Africa. Mr. Kupeb, it's good to have you on the show, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too, and it's a pleasure to be on this powerful panel.
Indeed. Mr. Dr. Nelson, it's also good to have you, and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for this session.
Indeed, and we do thank you for the patience joining us since 10 a.m. We thank you for that. Well, let's start with you. From an international point of view, what exactly is the U.S. Board of Peace, and why is it being introduced at this time?
Well, the U.S. Board of Trustees, popular. Donald Trump. It's not.
Dr. Nelson, please go ahead. We're having. Please go ahead.
Now, so provided this was an institution that has been discussed for some time, and at Davos, where Donald Trump presented some certain policy option towards demilitarization of certain forces in the Middle East, especially in Gaza, and likewise the reconstruction of the region, especially in Gaza. That was the primary motive of national institution owned by the U.S. But some scholars might have seen that way, looking at the body language and the how the institution has been managed. However, like I said, this institution was designed to provide stability and to rebuild Gaza, and again,
Dr. Nelson. Dr. Nelson, if you don't mind, can you put off your video so we can have a clearer audio? Dr. Nelson, if you can hear me, please put off your video so we can have a clearer audio.
Because your network seems to be dragging due to the weight of the video. So if you put up your video, we can be able to hear you clearer.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah, this is better.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, so I was saying that the emergence of the Board of Peace is not something that just came to be. This has been discussed at the World Economic Forum. And of course, directly or indirectly, the United Nations, of course, supports its creation. And this was primarily created to provide support and to rebuild Gaza, and as well to demilitarization within the region. And again, where it has raised little bit concern it has to do with the $1 billion fees for becoming a permanent member, and again having the U.S. president as a chairman that will serve for life. So in terms of its broader role, of course, it has to do with maintaining global peace. And that in itself, people has begin to ask questions. What happened to the role of the United Nations as a body that's meant to do that? And of course, there are other analysis or revelation to that, because whether we like it or not, the United Nations has failed in different angle in terms of humanitarian issues and conflict here and there. So Donald Trump has made it clear that this particular body may, underline that, or may replace the UN. And that statement has not been well with countries like China and European countries. So basically, like I said, this particular body is not a strange body. It has been discussed, and it has the backing of United Nations with the view of reconstruction and demilitarization of certain forces within the Middle East. And
Dr. Nelson, let me just interject here just before Usman asks the next question. Don't you think this may take the role of the UN itself if we have a replica of what the UN is itself?
Well, there are different organizations that have been put in place to deal with the issue of terrorism and conflict. But what makes this to be very unique is the way the US has taken some certain positions. And again, one cannot really say that this body wants to replace the UN because it has the backing of the UN. We have to understand that. It has the backing of the UN. The only big challenge is pay to play. In other words, this will limit membership.
Which means you have to subscribe to be part of, to be a member.
Exactly. So that will limit membership because currently the UN has over 190 something in the states that subscribe. So, and when you bring that to the Africa country or the West Africa, one will begin to say what are the countries or which particular country will be able to pay such amount of money. And that in itself will make Africa country not to make decision when it comes to issue affecting their regions. In other words, you see the US Board of Trustees try to take decision unilaterally without having some concrete input or getting involved countries within the West, so West Africa. So that's a huge issue that scholars are asking questions that this 1 billion fee, if at all the body decide to extend its operation to Africa in terms of conflict. And of course, such things, the local people, the government of states in Africa, they are meant to as well be involved. But if you cannot pay such amount of money, your involvement will be highly limited. And this gives the US some certain leverage for them to push back countries like China and Russia that have dominated West African states.
All right, Dr. Nelson, thank you very much for that broad response, and I think it's a sort of background. And this just leads us to the next question, which has actually been asked since this was proposed by Donald Trump during the Davos meeting. And the question is this a question of stability or a question of promoting democracy? Because if one looks at the historical record of America, from Latin America in the 70s to the recent shifts in what is happening in the Middle East, the US has often prioritized stability over democracy, because even recently in 2026, when we see the US mediating in conflicts like Gaza or Ukraine, one may ask, and I'm asking that this very question, how much of the motive of this Board of Peace by the US is about fostering genuine self-determination for those people versus simply quieting the noise to protect trade routes and military assets? Mr. Dabugat.
You want me to respond?
Mr. Dabugat.
Mr. Dabugat, this is for you.
All right, I'm so sorry. I was talking with my mic off. So thank you so much for this very beautiful question. I'm happy to be able to share my thoughts. First of all, looking from the angle of the US Board for Peace, you can, or is it Board of Peace, you can realize that intentions sometimes are far from what eventually happens. Because from the onset, the U.S. Board for Peace, or the Donald Trump Board of Peace, is a far departure from what was prescribed by the UN resolution.
Okay. Before you proceed, Mr. Dabuga.
Yes.
I said I like that clarification. Is there a difference between Donald Trump's Board of Peace and U.S. Board of Peace?
Oh, well, yes, there is a difference because the UN resolution that gave the mandate for a Board of Peace to be established, particularly centered around Gaza, centered around end of conflict, reconstruction, stabilization of the Gaza area specifically, but the U.S. Board of Peace, which claims to have, come out of that resolution, and which was launched at the World Economic Forum, is different from that perspective, given that it doesn't even mention Gaza anywhere in the charter, and then it is actually a sort of transactional body through which countries that are able to contribute $1 billion can actually take a slice of, so to say. And with Donald Trump specifically, not as US president now, but as a person being, the life chairman, the founding chairman, and he has all the sweeping powers of a dictator to determine the members, to determine the agenda, to determine who he invites to the to the body, and particularly to even approve all the plans, all the resolutions, all the funding that goes into the activities of the organization. So basically, this is a club that has been formed by Donald Trump.
Indeed, a club. Mr. Dabigat, let me just chip this in. I mean, with all of this, the U.S. President sitting on the power, what implication do you think this could have for the security cooperation, which we already have, especially in the Sahel, West Africa, and amidst the coups and insurgencies which we are seeing in our sub-region?
Well, the depressing view about this is that the U.S. Board of Peace clearly disregards the role that Africa can play, the role of any African country per se. I mean, there are not African countries that have been invited to be part of it, but there is no sub-Saharan African country that is part of it. And that, for me, gives me, a chill. It shows that basically the mandate of this institution does not really regard African countries as anything of importance. But even beyond that, the mandate of this Board of Peace centers not on Gaza, but now broadens the horizon of intervention to anywhere there is violent conflict and challenges for stability. And it gives sweeping powers to that body to coordinate and intervene. Now, for Africans, and this, I'm referring to conflict, stability issues, terrorism issues across Africa, especially for us now, West Africa and the Sahel, it becomes difficult to reconcile because from that angle of the Charter of the Board of Peace, the West African, the problems within the Sahel and West Africa are part of the mandate of this Board of Peace. But at the same time, addressing them the implication is that addressing them will not, refer anything, in any way to African countries in the resolution. And basically, if you look at the Board of Peace, there are certain points that I have mentioned that clearly takes the relevance of Africa from the Board of Peace. First, it is a body which is originally meant to guide Gaza through reconstruction, but does not include the Palestinians. Even themselves are not included. Nothing is mentioned about them. Secondly, the Charter of the Board of Peace does not even include or mention, Gaza as a place. It is focusing only on explaining the role. I mean, if you read the charter, you realize that most of the sections, most of the articles are focusing more on explaining the role of Donald Trump as a person in driving that group, which leaves the entire group to the whims and caprices of President Donald Trump.
All right. Okay, Mr. Dabuga, let me come in here because I could see Dr. Nelson has been itching to, of course, respond to some of the issues you have raised. But Dr. Nelson, I come back to you with this question because U.S., as you have said, did this in good faith to maintain peace and stability. And as you have been already, as we've heard from Mr. Dabuga, the West African sub-region is not even in consideration as a member, not to even talk of a beneficiary of some of this. But be that as it may, we know that the United States is the biggest exporter of arms and ammunition. Yet, this is a country that projects itself as peace mediator, and is now, coming up with a board of peace, and what have you? Now, with all of this, how do we balance U.S. as the greatest exporter of arms and ammunition, which is now referred to as arsenal of democracy, and its posturing now as a global peace mediator? Is there a correlation between these two? Mr. Dr. Nelson.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, Africa countries, there is need for them to have a strong activity in terms of fighting insurgency, terrorism, and the rest of them. There was a time that the U.S. they have a military base in Niger, Agadez, and of course, due to different forces or military coup, they were sent out of the place, and that particular body was handed over back was given to Nigeria to manage. The international system itself, of course, it has to do with interest. So I was expecting the Nigeria and other African leaders to see how they can consolidate that military base that the U.S. left for them. Right around and see how they can build a formidable force. Now, this board of peace, there are different opinions to its operation. But however, what I believe, whatever the case, the U.S., of course, they will come in full force, making sure they push out China and Russia and some other countries like Turkey, using the name Board of Peace to carry out their operation. And like what my brother from Nigeria said, the involvement of certain state actors in Africa. And again, this has to do with funding. If you don't have the financial muscle for you to be able to provide the needed security architecture, then you become a follower and see what is happening. So, but using ECOWAS and of course Africa Union as a kind of a base, I believe Africa countries can advance their own cause and perhaps see how they can contribute that money for them to be able to have a stronger diplomatic cause. Whether we like it or not, the Board of Peace has come to stay. And I must tell you, no matter the feelings of China and Russia, China will not allow the U.S. to take the credit in terms of building Gaza and of course, demilitarization, and with the view of having a two-state solution within the Middle East. So in Africa, I believe state actors, they have to be sensitive and see how they can have a strong foundation by which they have a negotiation or a diplomatic course with the US and see how they can manage the affair. Or if at all they did not take this route, I believe you will see the US or what we call the Board of Peace come into different African states and carry out different operations. The US in itself, at one particular point or the other, basically they are into how they can fight terrorism. But in terms of democracy, when you see the Sahel, why they are trying to do that, the military that decide to take over powers, that in itself has watered down the effort of the US. And that is why you don't see more of them, and you see China and Russia. So in a nutshell, I will argue or identify that there is need for African actors to have a strong relation with the US. And with that, they will be able to control what affects them.
Well, indeed. Well, we do have a comment from one of our listeners, and this is from Mr. Chena Kamara. And he says, many U.S. peace bodies reflect U.S. priorities, not global needs. African countries are often treated as recipients of aid or security operations and not as equal political actors whose conflicts deserve sustained peace-building attention. This is a comment by Mr. Chena Kamara. Mr. Dabagad, I would like you to look at this. I mean, he's referring to Africa being treated as recipients of aid or security operations and not as equal political actors whose conflict deserves sustained peace-building attention. What do you make out of this, Mr. Dabagad? Mr. Dabagad, are you there? Please unmute.
Yeah. So sorry. Well, that is the direction from which I was coming. Yes, it's not just, I don't see it as just a matter of financing. If you don't have the financing, then you don't have a say. No, that's not how the international global order has been constructed. And it's because of that I insist that the U.S. Board of Peace is actually an aberration to the international order. Even though, of course, it is not far-fetched from the pattern of international engagement by the U.S. over time. But I mean, with this coming of the Board of Peace, the U.S. has taken it a step further because the U.S. has always tried to look for how to create a way to circumvent the international institutions. You would know, we would all know that in the last 3 weeks, or rather 3 weeks ago, the U.S. exited 66 global institutions, 66 global multilateral organizations. That is to show you that the U.S. has, within this era, decided to go at things internationally alone. And in addition to that, it has exited 31 UN bodies within at that time. I think it was part of the preparation it was making before the launch of the Board of Peace. That from the charter, you would see that it is something that constructs the role of the U.S. into a global, police, so to say, that we have been trying to avoid. But coming down to Africa, you see, the role of Africa in this regard is very, very important because Africa has always been excluded. And this is a time globally where there is this narrative about inclusion, about participation, about involvement. And Africa seems to be left behind, even in this new kind of arrangement. For the Sahel and Africa, there is no excuse in moving, in leaving all these things to the outside parties to come to Africa and direct things here. There is no excuse for that. Africa needs to begin to assert itself, and in order to assert itself, Africa needs to also begin to form its own international organization at the African level that will provide it with the level playing ground it needs to have globally. I feel also that the fact that Africa has been keeping quiet, has been more on the defensive side, has led to all these kinds of.
But do you think it's a wake-up call, Mr. Dabiga, now that you're mentioning? You think with all of this is happening, the AU needs to sit up?
Yes, it is a wake-up call. Well, I wouldn't say the AU per se, but the African countries need to sit up and insist on negotiating globally as a bloc, and to do that genuinely. You see, part of why Africa needs to sit up is because looking at the globe, the potentials globally for development, the potential for economic advancement, they are all in Africa. Mineral resources, population, even economic growth targets are beginning to pick up in Africa. We need to control that, and in order to control that, Africa needs to sit up. And, perhaps the framework of the African Union as it is now may not be adequate enough. There is a need to improve on it and ensure that African countries are at the center of global affairs. At least their interests are being represented in global fora.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Nelson, you've been listening keenly, and the question I want to ask before we round up this very segment is, will all of these moves, Mr. Dabugad noted, U.S. exiting about 66 international organizations, and now exiting over 30 UN bodies, including the WHO. Do you think all of these activities will survive? All of these decisions will survive after Donald Trump? But before you answer, I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Emmanuel Dennis, who is with us all the way from Monrovia, that is the capital of Liberia. Thank you for watching. Dr. Nelson, can these activities survive after Donald Trump leaves office?
Well, the U.S. system, it is not just about Donald Trump. You have the U.S. foreign policy, and you have the entire citizen of the U.S. It's not like Africa, whereby people normally label a decision made by the president as his own personal decision. I believe to a large extent, some of the decisions made under Donald Trump, of course, it will survive. And again, for so many years, the U.S., they have criticized that the UN decisions, activities tend to favor China. And that in itself, they felt that that body is no longer useful. And again, aside that, the UN, like I started from the beginning, the UN has failed. Likewise, the African Union in terms of different crises that has engulfed different countries. Just look at Sudan. When it comes to humanitarian crisis, Sudan has faced huge humanitarian crisis. And what has African Union or UN has done? So these are some of the gaps that has existed within the UN, and you begin to see US begin to withdraw from certain activities within the UN body. So I believe the decision that made by US under Donald Trump's government, to a large extent, some of those decisions will still remain, because, like I said, the U.S. felt that the existence of the UN has not served the interests of the U.S. people. Rather, it tried to have the interests of China and some other communist states. And again, on a broader perspective, the UN has failed coming to Africa in terms of the humanitarian crisis that Sudan is facing and some other crisis. So, to that extent, I will argue that whatever decisions have been made, to a large extent, whether or not, of course, such decision will be maintained. And I believe, based on what my brother was saying, now, one of the issues affecting Africa Union, ECOWAS, or other regional body is the inability for members for them to pay their subscription fees. And if at all you couldn't pay that, how will you make such viable decision? How will you make that organization to be viable? So,
Dr. Nelson, sorry, let me continue. Don't you think pegging that fee at $1 billion is actually a deliberate act to exclude some of these poorer countries?
My friend, there is more to do in the Middle East. That $1 billion, it is not for Donald Trump's personal pocket. Those are the ways some of us are trying to look at it. That money is meant to rebuild Gaza. And when you look at now, have you ever asked yourself, where would the money come from in terms of building Gaza? And from the UN charter, or what they have discussed at Davos, they said it's going to be voluntary. So when that particular comment has been made, okay, building this particular region, members should volunteer to donate. That in itself will set back the building of Gaza. So if at all that $1 billion has been identified, it's a way of making sure that things will be done. So that money is not the personal money for Donald Trump, or the money is coming to the U.S. post. That money is to be to build Gaza.
But are you concerned that this may become a new normal, that one country that has the power to destroy another country arbitrarily will go ahead and do just that? And then after, the world, a US or another country will now come up to form a body asking other countries to contribute towards rebuilding that country. Shouldn't we make efforts to even stop such activities from even happening in the first place? I mean, like aggression aggression that the Gaza has suffered. The Gaza is now in ruins, and now Donald Trump is now coming up with a board of peace, asking other countries to contribute money towards rebuilding. Shouldn't the effort have been towards even stopping such a destruction from happening in the first place?
Well, I will not say whether a particular country went to another region to destroy. Our concern in Africa, we should be concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Sudan and how Africa Union can as well identify how they can build regions that are ruled by different kind of conflicts. So the question of whether a particular country or a state destroy a region, I believe the U.S. has made its move, and I believe I stand to be criticized. I don't care. The U.S. should be commended. They should be commended, and they should be applauded based on this particular move. And I believe, as we begin next, how event unfold, you will see China making sure that they will also contribute their quota. Of course, the Russian government, Putin has made it clear that the U.S. they should make use of their frozen assets. After when they have taken that $1 billion, of course, they can return the other part of the money. So the question of whether a particular country destroy one and the other one is trying to come and rebuild, I don't want to make comment on that. But however, the U.S.
Dr. Nelson. Indeed. Well, Usman, I may have to pass this to you because I understand we do have some comments on the chat box. And if you can see from your end, please go ahead. Let's take those comments before we get the final thought from Mr. Dabagat. Please go ahead, Usman.
All right. Abdullahi Toure, who has been with us from the beginning of the program, is commenting here saying, withdrawal of U.S. support is teaching us to look inward and harness our resources well. That is from Abdullahi Toure.
All right. Well, Mr. Dabagat, as we round off this session, my final question to you. I mean, with this subscription pegged at $1 billion, do you think there will be any African country, even within our sub-region, who may want to be part of this club, this U.S. club, in order to enjoy global or U.S. protection? You think there will be any?
Well, I would say a categorical no, because I mean, not just in Africa. Already we have been excluded from this plan, but even beyond that, you realize that several, global powers or emerging powers have declined invitation to this body. So already you see that this body is picking up steam only on the personality of Donald Trump. Most of the countries that have signed on so far, I don't know how many of them have paid yet, but most of the countries that have signed on are countries that see this as an opportunity to show up their international diplomatic standing, which, well, may be good for them, but in terms of the utility, in terms of what it manifests to globally, it only gives Donald Trump the power to decide on how to bully people across, the world. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think Africans would want to do that except if there is some benefit for them in it. And so far, I don't see any benefit for Africans. The board itself is made up of basically Americans. Even the part of the board that deals with Gaza is also made of majority Americans so it is actually a U.S. body. If you see that it is just a U.S. body that conforms to the normal pattern of U.S. involvement in global affairs. It's not really something new. The only new element is just bringing Donald Trump at the head and making him, to personalize, the involvement. So for me, I think the plan is already beginning to fail. It will definitely fail. And I see that after Donald Trump, this
Mr. Tochukwu, please, can you mute your microphone? We can hear you.
I strongly feel that after Donald Trump, this thing will gradually decline, just like many of the other international bodies that have been established by the U.S.
All right, Mr. Davigat.
As a way of circumventing international law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dabugat, for that wonderful submission. We do sincerely thank our guest, First Dr. Nelson Gulpin Oba Akwoga, joined us all the way from Gambia, Banjul, capital of Gambia. Of course, he is an associate professor of political science at the University of the Gambia. And of course, we've also had with us Mr. Kopep Dabugat. He is the Executive Director, Center for Innovative Governance and Sustainable Development, CIG Africa. Gentlemen, we sincerely thank you for joining us on this segment of the program.
Thank you, and it's always a pleasure to.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Davigada and Dr. Nelson. Thanks so much for your time. All right, there we have it, our first session over, and it's time to bring in our second session. Now, if you're just joining us on radio or streaming on YouTube and Facebook, this is Citizens Hour. We're coming to you live from West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal. And we have been examining what the U.S. border peace means for the Sahel and West Africa. Usman.
Yes, and now our segment, of course, across Africa, the issue of aging leadership and the concentration of power is becoming an increasingly prominent topic of public debate all over Africa, especially in West Africa. Now, in many countries, political leadership remains dominated by figures who have been in power for decades, older than myself, more than 40 years, often extending their rule through constitutional changes, political alliances, or what has now been referred to as strong control of state institutions. Now, this discussion explores how aging leadership affects democracy, economic development, and social cohesion. Imo.
Well, to answer all of these questions and more, we have two important guests joining us on this segment. And joining us from Yaoundé in Cameroon is Dr. Eyolo Nganje. He is the chair of political affairs at the AU ECOSOG and the program director, Center for Research on Democracy and Development in Africa. Dr. Eyolo, if you can hear me, welcome to the program.
All right. And also joining us from Abuja here is Tochukwu Ifemene Emmanuel. He is a leadership and governance expert. Mr. Tochukwu, if you can hear me, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. I hope you can hear me too.
We can hear you loud and
clearly.
clear.
Thank you very much for being with us. I think you've been with us for quite since we started the first segment. Thank you very much for your patience. Now, let me start with you directly, Mr. Tochukwu. How does aging leadership shape governance and decision-making in many African countries today? Is aging a problem in our leadership space?
Okay, so thank you once again for having us here. And aging as a concept is not a problem in the general sense of the word of leadership. And we needed to establish that because we've had presidents who retired early, if I can say, stay on board and became what we call minister mentor. That's President Lee Kuan Yew for over 20 years after he handed over power in 1990, and in his old age he was doing very well. We have President Trump, who is in his 70s, even like mid or over close to his 80s, and he's doing well. The concept of aging that has beclouded African leadership, which now looks like a challenge or a problem, is the fact that we are not seeing a drive in innovation. The world has changed. Post-COVID has changed. Just 2020 or the year 2000 has changed. The realities has changed. The dynamics have changed. The discussion about climate change, the discussion about a growing population, what do you do with them, on technology, on STEM, the different narratives that makes one without an edge in delivering good governance or in delivering what we say generally or popularly in the loose sense of the word, the dividends of democracy, or the deliveries that make a state to come out of poverty in any form or any shape. Because such a set of persons are not vast in the indicators or in the indices or the intricacies of details, the diplomatic overtones. We have a country like Rwanda, who we see there's a very strong drive to bring the upcoming generations into governance, very intentional in policy. We have a nation in Nigeria where there was a time where to bring a generation into leadership, we created what they call the Nigeria Youth Service Corps, not just for the concept of national integration, but to have a generation of people who are vast on patriotism and who can be fitted, whether it's in civil or public service, but as professionals. Okay? But that system did not evolve. So generally, I cannot say it is, when you say a leadership as a problem, are you talking about the state governors? Are we talking in the context of the presidency? But one thing has remained as a factor, because that factor has even followed people in where we analyze of even people who were younger in ages, even not up to 50, but have had very, very terrible performance in leadership. And we've had people who are also very young, they've come into governance and they are trying to do the best they can do because they know that youth comes with vigor, it comes with energy, it comes with vision. So the problem that is there in Africa's problem is a structural problem, it's a systemic problem that is not addressing changes in reality, shifts of emerging realities that are supposed to deliver governance in the system, which sometimes also plugs with any mind that is not always trying to be a bit of development. Okay, so that is what I will say that has plugged African leadership at all levels. You are having institutions like, for example, in my country here, where youth supposed to be the leaders. In fact, it can be called like a National Youth Council, where you are seeing somebody that is over 50 being on the head of that kind of council. You're asking, is that the age of youth? We're having Africa begin to redefine the terms of the age of what youth supposed to represent. We're having political institutions that don't have the well-defined youth wing. We're having even private sector organizations that are not having a bridge of a systematic way of training, mentoring people for a succession plan to take over the next generation. So I think it's a problem that has to do with a systemic gap and a structural deficit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tochukwu. Quite a very broad take on as we launch into this program. Before we proceed, I want to say sincere thank you to Omar Sese, he's been with us. Abdullahi Toure has also been with us, and Jalamang Sane. Thank you very much. We acknowledge your presence on this very platform and this conversation. We want to believe that. If you have comments, you can continue to drop them, of course, in our comment section. We will definitely read them out. But Mr. Tochukwu, although you've already said, if I hear you correctly, you insinuated that aging shouldn't actually be a problem. You've cited example of leaders like Lee Kuan Yew, who until his death was actually very valuable to the leadership of and governance of his country. Now, looking at the West African and then Africa generally, governance space, of course, the average age of our leaders has always been around 60 and above. And the question being asked here is very simple. Because putting it side by side, what you said about Lee Kuan Yew, one would have expected that grandpas such as our Papa in Cameroon, our Papa in Guinea Conakry, and other places would actually sit back and be offering those valuable, pieces of advice to the younger generation, particularly since after COVID-19 that things changed. We're now more in a digital space where even governance must catch up. Is aging still a curse for Africa and African leaders from your own perspective? Even though you've touched on it, I'm asking this question purposely so that we can be able to understand whether aging is a curse. Because in Africa we believe that wisdom comes with age, but in governance space, exactly, this seems to be different. But let me ask you one more time so that you can just elaborate more on this. Mm-hmm. Is aging, especially aging leadership, a curse for Africans as we have it today?
So let me maybe rephrase it again. Not a curse, first of all. Let's look at it whether it's even a blessing. What is the positive of it? Which is that with age leadership, you actually have people who have strength in experience, right? Because even if you check, even in the world, some of the best stockbrokers, some of the best scientists in certain fields, some of the best judges in the world. That's why, like in Nigeria, we've even shifted the age of retirement for judges to even 70. Is because actually that age also come with strength and experience. You can't take that. Like in the medical school, you see how they take them, intentionally train them by surgeons who have had years of experience. So for me, it's really not supposed to be a curse. Because if you say it's a curse, it's now a permanent state of being. We still believe that even if the younger generations are going to make an impact, they have to rely on the strength and experience of others. I'm a biographer. One of my businesses I do is that I write biographies. And I can tell you that when you are writing for a client who is over 70, 80, 90, it's different from those ones who call me to chronicle their works that are 40, 50, 60. It's something that I stumbled by experience. The one that is 80 and 90, when you're interviewing them for their biographies and you will discover that life comes as a fold, and the experience and the wisdom, just like you said, comes actually in the age. You can't take that. So for that, it comes with the strength in experience. However, in our democratic experiment, what has happened is that it has limited the democratic process. So let me give an example and put it in context where it looks more or less like a course. If you look at the military system anywhere in the world, it is expected that you join the military and you graduate from a military college at 23, okay? And from that stretch of 23 to possibly 55, or the countries that are 60, your promotion are literally timed by a tenure base of, for some countries 2 years, for some countries 3 years. It was before that, it was even 4 years, long ago, maybe about 20 years for your promotion. And you know the essence of that, so that at every stage, based on your experience on the job, the passing of your exams, you can quickly rise to a leadership rank, because every rank in the military is actually equivalent to the number of persons that you are meant to command. So a brigadier general, a lieutenant general, a full general, a colonel, a captain, a major, they have the number of people that is expected that they can command. Meaning that if you don't grow and pass your exams during those period of time, you'll be stunted in your growth to command and lead a lot of people. That is why in every country, you are going to find more officers than you find soldiers, because soldiers are the foot soldiers. The officers are the thinkers. They are the leaders. Okay, they must go through a process that prepares them, and that is why at the height of, let's say, brigadier general and lieutenant general, brigadier general, and a full-time general, those people, anything they say is by law, because they know the level of training and exposure. The same thing actually happens in a political experiment. Let me be sincere with you. We did a study at a point in time and discovered that that was why you see most democratic experiment, you see a particular leader wanting to stay close, like for a 2 tenure. We discovered that the economies that had balance and made a trajectory into where they are, their average leader, look at Cuba, stayed for a minimum of more than 20 years. Or you find a particular political party, when you come to the United States, they finish and they want to hand over back to their political party to extend a period of time of idea. And there's something about leadership. If you have a good succession plan, what happens that even when you succeed, somehow you have an oversight of it, or you want to see that is developed. Now, in two places that it looks like it has become a cause, a system where there's no system where they intentionally grow to enter leadership grooming. I call it grooming, or you call it formation. Leadership delegation, you start allowing them to do certain things, which actually in the democratic experiment, if you check, you start your election from the ward level, a councillor, a chairman, you go to, you now say maybe you're going for the state house of assembly, you go for the national state of assembly, you go for the senate, before you say you go for it. It is expected that if you grow along that rank, even in my country, Nigeria, if you look at politicians that actually started from those low rung up to where they are, some of them that eventually became governors, you can see that in the issues of governance, they display a kind of dexterity because they learned on the rope. Now, because there's no great grand, what I call like an African vision or like a national plan, because anywhere there's no national plan, this kind of problem that we are talking about that looks like a cause, it becomes
Mr.
like that. Because
let me interject there and bring in Mr. Dabagat, who has been on, and he would want to be part of this conversation. But thank you very much for those clarifications. Mr. Dabagat, welcome back. Well, they say youth are the leaders of tomorrow. Are we still keeping to that phrase, especially finding ourselves in this political context?
Well, unfortunately, you know me, I give my answers very direct. Unfortunately, I think no. No, because I've realized that leadership in Africa is a domain whereby the older ones have spent their own time in leadership and are spending the time for the younger ones. So, yes, the younger ones are the leaders of tomorrow. It's a valid statement. But the tomorrow has to start now. Tomorrow has to start now.
Mr. Dabagat, at what point, at what point of this leadership would you say political experience is becoming strength? And when does it begin to limit democratic renewal?
Well, I think political experience is overrated. Really, I think leadership is not about being there. It's a mindset. It's about the mindset of being able to take responsibility for things that are required to be done within the community, you know. And whether young or old, once you have that mindset, you can move mountains with it. I think that is the part that we do not understand or have not embraced across Africa, because leadership is almost synonymous with gerontocracy. You know, the old people are the leaders, you know, and that has been a normal scene within Africa. But you see, for me, as leadership, seeing leadership as a cross-cutting commodity that can be found at any stage in the age continuum. I feel that Africans need to evolve. Yes, in the past, the elders used to be the leaders within the African context simply because they had more experience in life generally, you know. But now we've seen that leadership can actually take root even at the younger person's level. So you realize that in Africa...
Mr. Damgad, sorry, let me interject here. One of our ardent followers on Zoom, Mr. Omar Sise, he's asking a question that actually sits with what you are just saying. He said, how can Africa balance respect for senior leadership with the urgent need for democratic renewal? It's from Omar Sise.
Exactly. No, absolutely, I resonate in that spirit, you know, because you see, the space for leadership or the chance for leadership has been taken away completely from the younger ones. And we need to reset the society so as to get back to that level whereby being a younger person means you are only improving on the leadership qualities you have, not necessarily...
But how do you reset that, Mr. Davigat? How do we reset it?
Yes. I mean, the youths need to take the mantle. You know, as I said, I feel leaders are, or rather, the youths are the leaders of tomorrow, yes. But the leadership that is available for the youth need to start now. Tomorrow starts now. You know, given that the youths, I feel that the youths have to stand up and show that they are ready to be counted, you know, not necessarily having it handed over to them, but they need to begin to show that they are taking responsibility, even for lower things, by themselves. You know, and that is difficult.
Well,
difficult.
I would like to ask.
Reality of our society.
Yes, I would like to ask Tochukwu this question. Because you said it's time for them to take the leadership role, the mantle, and knowing the kind of political atmosphere which we find ourselves in West Africa, how possible is that, Tochukwu? This is for you.
Oh, very, very possible. So let me give you a scenario. Like my dear senior brother just said now, you have to take power. You're not going to wait for it. Everybody that started, they took power. But you see, there's an issue that I think maybe youth needs to understand, and that's part of what we do, and we keep on. You need to form what I call intelligentsias, okay? A group of enlightened people, you come together, what do you want to do in this particular sector? And immediately attach with a long-term plan. And immediately begin to know that you cannot do it alone. It's not a one-man thing. It's an interconnectivity activity. It's a group of network. If you can lead yourself, you can lead a group of other persons. Okay. What we need more in Africa, it's more youths forming more intentional intelligentsias with a long-term perspective. So what is our engagement going to be in the next 10 years, not in the next election, which is where we always get it wrong. You see how people make a lot of speed to say, because there's an election coming in November this year or maybe December, we therefore have to start. It does not work like that. We're working on stuff like that in Nigeria. And I can tell you that part of some of the activities we're trying to do is to make the biggest massive sensitization for just going to vote, for the people to realize this is their power. So it goes back towards sensitization. And that is what political parties are meant to do. A group of people who come together like an intelligentsias, whether they want to do it in judiciary, whether in economics, by going to business, or in the political play. When you start like that, what you do, and I've seen it work for certain youths. I mean, let me give an example for a particular politician in Nigeria from Plateau State. They call him Honorable Bagos. Okay, if you go online, Datrum Bagos. I literally watched him. Yes, Honorable Datrum Bagos. I literally watched him gain grassroots support for years, about 4 years before attempting to go to House of Rep. He went, and it was a landslide victory because of a particular problem they had in their state in the last election that affected the whole party. Everybody from PDP went off. He was not going to be going to the House of Assembly, but you think he was going to go back and sleep and wait for the next election. From that day to today, I am talking. His intelligentsia, his network base, their advocacy of what he was doing years ago, it has even increased. Now he's not even going back for the House of again. He's now making an attempt to go for the Senate. So that is what I'm saying. But there's a team of people who are concerned that we can do things together. So for me, I see a lot of hope, because if you look at certain elders that we have across Africa, when they started, it was the same model they used. One man stands up, he looks for a group of persons, they form what I call an intelligentsia, you can call it a mastermind, they form a political alliance, they put a plan before them, they enter inside, and it's like a team that is formed. Because at the end of the day, if you look at it basically fundamentally for what it is, political engagement starts from the political association. It's an association of people who want to lead themselves for the greater good. But like I said to somebody, when I checked like the Chinese model of bringing leadership, or you check the Singaporean way of bringing leadership, and currently now, like India, I'm calling this continent because they are large in numbers, and they're a continent that at a point in time dealt with poverty very, very seriously. And just opposite with what is happening here in Nigeria, you just discover that a group of people who are youths, who are idealistic, very important, high in ideas, come and craft an ideology, but lead by the example. And I think that is where even the African youth sometimes will have challenges, where you see a lot of skinship among them. They can't even work in unity, even down to the student union organization. You see some kind of, no more ideology again, no more the picture, no more for the states. But the more we can cultivate that patriotic spirit, which, by the way, sorry to say, even the aged ones, I discovered that they don't have it. Because if they have it, we'll not be having this program that we're talking about. So yes, it's very possible. People are doing it. And what we need to do even here in the media is to keep on talking about it, keep on mainstreaming it. I remember when a bill was about to be passed in Nigeria, the Not Too Young to Run bill. Yeah. I remember the road that the media played for it. The media was literally on our ears and our eyes, television, on the media, almost on a daily basis. And I love that. And I knew just because of that advocacy, that bill was going to be signed. Eventually, that bill was signed. But can I tell you something? 8 years after that bill was signed, today, I can tell you that you are not having a sustained pressure group or an intelligentsia or a mastermind or a group of people forming an association or political party to say they are going to run as a result of the fallout of that bill. Yeah.
Well, Tochukwu, I would like to take you up on that. I do have a question actually from one of our listeners that resonated with what you've said, and also for Mr. Dabaga. But before then, like we call it, it's Citizens Hour, and the citizens are talking. This is from Cherno Kamara, and he says that African societies are becoming younger, more urban, more educated, and more digitally connected, with rising expectations for jobs, accountability, and participation. This mismatch creates a widening gap between rulers and citizens, leading to policy rigidity, weak responsiveness, limited youth representation, declining trust in state institutions, and recurring political unrest as governments struggle to adapt to the realities of modern African societies. Well, thank you so much, Cherno M. Kamara, for sending in that message in the program. Well, to the question that I have on our WhatsApp platform, of course, this will be for both of you, but I'd like Mr. Dabaga to respond first. Now, youth movements are facing repression and arrest. So, how do you now say people will take over? For example, this listener gave instances of what is happening in Togo, what is happening in Nigeria, what is happening in Uganda, what is happening in Kenya. So now, when youth movements are being repressed, their leadership is being arrested, how do they now take over as we are discussing? Mr. Dabaga, you respond first.
I mean, I started by saying, during my last intervention, I ended around where I was saying it's not difficult. It's something that is really very difficult to achieve, because it is about power. And power here, we're talking about being in position to exercise, authoritative, oversight over things that happen in society. We are talking about money. We are talking about network. We are talking about reach and access. And unfortunately, the youths do not really have that readily in their hands. When I say they need to begin to take leadership, it's about what my brother Tochukwu had mentioned. It's about being deliberate in constructing, infrastructure that will support you, because any politician, anybody in power, even in business, before they stand, they construct that infrastructure. Whether in business, you construct your business enterprise. In politics, you construct your political followership, in and then of course in governance, you again remodel that same networks you have to be able to serve in delivering the goods to the people. So it is not an easy task for the youth, but with unity, I mean, the youth have it on the side of the population, and that counts for much, because that really determines the vote balance. That also determines the extent to which you can do a lot of things. The youth have the energy, so they can invest as much as possible in, driving a narrative that suits them, driving, an agenda that will bring them up to the fore, But unfortunately, as we are now, the youths are only driving the agenda for the older people, and it's really a sad story. And this is across Africa, So the youths have to stand really strong. You see what happened in Kenya. The youths picked up the fight and demanded for the task laws to be properly looked into, or to be scrapped completely. And not just that, they got it scrapped. They got also some officials in government removed. That is, power. For me, that is, taking responsibility. And sometimes you have to stand even in the face of, guns and bombs and, cannons and what have you that are mobilized to disperse you. I mean, it's not easy. It's not something that will be easy for the youth, but they have to stand up. What? I mean, democracy, let's take the example of Nigeria. Democracy was won by a struggle, first by the youth, and eventually the elders eventually got the courage to pick it up because the youth were standing. We remember IBB must go protest in the 80s. That in itself continued to transform until we came and had the NADECO and other platforms that came up that got the consensus even right up there at the level of the elders. So the youth have to continue to seek that opportunity to lead.
Okay. Tochukwu, I will have to ask you the same question because reference has been made that power is not given but taken. And of course, Mr. Dabugas talked about youth taking the mantle of leadership. And that reminded me of a youth program that I attended. It was funny, but not funny, where a very energetic young man said, "We have been to the rooms of power, but we can't find the mantle," meaning that the mantle has actually been hidden by the aged. But that is just on a lighter note. From your own perspective, is it that easy? Is it easier said that? Is it not easier said than done? That the youth must, wrestle power from the aged, so that they can be able to reflect the current realities that they want seen in the governance space.
Okay, so permit me to rephrase the realities of how pragmatically things happens on the ground. Okay, there's no concept like the youth, or the aged. It's a group of people who got concerned versus out of the segment people who got concerned trying to get involved in leadership. Anytime you see a mass action of so-called youths, Tunisia, Kenya, Uganda, it has happened before, in Nigeria, in Ghana, what happens? It is sporadic, and as sporadic it comes, that is how it dies. The political elite, mark the word I'm using, who came together over 20 years ago, have become friends, have bonded, have understood themselves, political allies, they fall out sometimes, but because there is no set of persons, I don't even want to call it youth, who can come together, have this long-term plan, overcome a lot of challenges. Do you know that the sophistication of the early sets of people who I could call in their mid-youths, because some of them are freedom fighters in the African experiment. I don't even want to call them founding fathers yet. I'll call them freedom fighters. We're in a transition of mid-30s, early 40s. Very few of them were 50s. If you look at the time of ANC when they started, people were like Mandela was just like in his early 30s, a young graduate, or when you come to Ghana, a young boy of 24, trying to fight an established system of the British colonialism. It is more hard or harder to have dislodged colonialism in that era around the world than what we are having now to dislodge political leaders who fought, got leadership, but are not now delivering their dividends of democracy. So when I tell people, when we lead people, when we are doing certain things, there's a lot of patience. There's a lot of ideas together. There's a lot of long-term things. Sorry to say, this is what most youths don't want to hear. They think is that because you can speak very loudly on social media, or sometimes you think you can be rude to others without no plan. There's no blueprint. You are not anywhere strategically. You are not in any political party strategically. You think it will happen. So a youth, I'll call it, for lack of a better word, I'll call it patriotic elite youth. Patriotic because it's for nation, elite because they are very good in what they are doing. They can go from a radio station like this where we have, and 247, they start doing this kind of conversation morning to night. And you discover that as part of this conversation morning to night, maybe every Wednesday from 12 to 1, you are going to learn civic education. In another point, you are going to learn electioneering. In another point, you will learn what good governance is. In another point, you will learn how to form cooperative. In another point, you will learn how to get grants. In another point, you will learn how to do advocacy by report writing. Imagine that kind of bombardment of information coming from a platform, but with this kind of narrative, because what has happened in this era, and we must understand it around the whole world, not just an African thing, is that democracy now is a business of narratives. It's no more the lofty democracy that you want to do things for the welfare. For some states, it's for the pride of their nation. Some is the emergence of another political elite who wants to come and buy the state. And I think it's actually basically what is happening in Africa. So it looks hard for the young generations. When they say they enter the room, you will not find that power talk at hand anywhere going to get. Even the person that is trying to groom you in the name of trusting to give you, he's also watching you. Are you a dependable youth? Do you even have it inside of you? I've been in certain rooms and in certain discussions, and you will know that just from the moment you're discussing with them, you are being profiled. And by the time you start bringing out certain things, they know whether you're somebody to be with them or somebody they need to also fight, because they know that you are awakened, you are enlightened, which is why most of our institutions are not well enlightened. So a lot of this patriotic elite, if I may use that word, lack of a better word, you must come together, you must have your ideology, you must be in the rooms that matters, in your different sectors. You must have a long-term plan, and you must engage. This thing is structural, this thing is organized, this thing is intentional. Because if you check, look at the president of Rwanda. I like making reference to him because currently he's the one that is raising another generation of youth to enter. And I know what he's doing actually. It's not just because he doesn't believe in his set. Yes, he's doing it because he's intentionally incubating another generation, almost equivalent to, like some speculators will say, that of his son. But for me, I feel, Rwanda right now is one of the number one when it comes to the ICT. Do you know what that means? That's to tell you that in the next 10 years, this particular country, they will be number one on e-governance, they will be number one on cybersecurity, they will be number one on technological advancement, they will be number one in STEM. That is an intentional stuff. So if you are grooming the next generation of people who will take over you so that they can raise to another generation, you see, there's going to be a clear balance.
All right.
So for me, it's not going to be easy.
We have to start rounding off. Yes, indeed. We have to start rounding off. And as we round off this conversation, it's time to maybe profile one or two solutions. Briefly, Mr. Dabiga, let me take you up. Tochukwu had mentioned earlier the role of the media. You talked about this program. Well, what else from your end as a CSO should be doing political parties to encourage generational inclusion in leadership?
Yes. I think that, there is a lot of transformations happening globally, and we have to catch on to the tide. One of those transformations that we need to catch on to is the need for deliberate dialogue with political leaders. And when I say deliberate dialogue with political leaders, I know it is the political parties that produce the political leaders, so to say. Let's say in a country that doesn't have the provision for an independent candidate, most of the political leaders or rather all the political leaders are members of a political party, So we have to step up conversations, deliberate conversations with the political parties about their programs for the youths and how they hope to carry the youths along, Then secondly also, the mantle is in the hands of the youth. I heard earlier, your colleague was mentioning that they have gone into the rooms of power and then they couldn't find the mantle. Because the mantle is in their hand and they did not recognize that it is the mantle. The youths need to carry, the fight to the field. The youths have to, by themselves, build deliberate programs that will bring them up to that level where they can actually challenge the power structures. So this is a structural issue. It's not as if it is dependent on people. It's a structural issue. It is dependent on the way society is constructed. So I feel that the youth have to also do some construction of themselves. They have to begin to build programs that will help them build capacity. They have to provide the entry points and the platforms for youth to stand and face the society and take power.
We have to say sincere thank you to you, Mr. Dabugat, for, of course, you've been here since the first segment and up until the second segment, contributing very, very, deeply into the conversations. Thank you very much. And of course, before we round up, I will want to ask Mr. Tochukwu Ifemene for his last, concluding remark, just 1 minute, because we're already out of time before we round up.
Okay, once again, thank you, gentlemen. I used to tell youths, don't allow anybody to cook your meat for you. You cook your meat. Meat is MEAT. So meat means what do you use your money for? What do you use your energy for? What do you use your attention for? And what do you use your time for? Any youth that does not prepare his meat will eat the meat of another generation. So prepare your meat, put your money for mobilization, give all your energy, use technology to arrest attention, and give your time to read. Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tobechukwu. In fact, indeed, we really sincerely appreciate you for your attention and very, very deep and well-researched contributions to this conversation. We also want to say sincere thank you before I allow Imo to wrap it up. We want to say sincere thank you to Mr. Chano M. Kamara, who has been with us all the way from Gambia. Thank you very much for being there. Omar Sise, you've also been very actively involved in this program. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And Jalamang Sane also joined us, and a lot of others who have joined us on Facebook and YouTube. Sincere thank you. As I say, thank you very much, and have a very blessed weekend from my end. Imo.
Indeed, many thanks to Mr. Dabigat again for being with us all through the start of this program. We appreciate your time. And also to Chukwu, who is the fellow Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, for his contribution. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And everyone that has sent in a message or two on our WhatsApp platform, on Facebook, the ones we couldn't take, thank you so much for your time. Well, let's do this again next week. We'll be back with another interesting topic. I am Imoeded here in Dakar. Usman.
And I am Usman Omar, all the way from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Bye for now.
All right, coming up next is our midday news with Abdullah Hassan. And let me say a big thank you to all of our technical crew behind the glass, led by Mustafa Sek and Maudu. Thank you so much for your time. Well, see you all next weekend. I am Imoeded. Bye for now.
This 2026 Citizens Hour returns live on radio. Renewed, more interactive, and closer to you. You can now join us live every Saturday on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM in Dakar, starting 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. in French and from 10:30 a.m. to 11:55 a.m. in English. You can also follow our live streamings on Facebook and YouTube. Citizens Hour is your space to speak up. You can now comment live on issues, ask questions, and engage directly with our presenters and invited experts as we unpack major developments shaping West Africa. Make your voice heard. Be part of the conversation every Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in French and 10:30 a.m. to 11:55